Okay, today is January 22nd, 2022. There is a pattern that my brother has noticed that we've talked about. So he has been working in machine shops for the past over 5 years, I think. And, well, machine shops, he's not going to like this comparison, but they kind of work like restaurants where you get an order and then the people in the room make that order. So most of the time the order is from some company that you've never heard of or that isn't really that interesting. Most of the stuff that you make in a machine shop really is kind of boring, arguably, depending on who you are. But there's something interesting that happens because he's been working at these shops in Southern California. And once in a while, you'll get an order for a part from SpaceX. So SpaceX will put in orders. And it's like any other order where there's some sort of list of tasks you have to do. And, you know, it depends on the shop you're in, it depends on the piece, it depends on what exactly we're talking about here. But basically, something happens when you get an order from SpaceX. Since most of the people that work at machine shops tend to be, they tend to be SpaceX fans just in general, just because SpaceX makes rocket ships and they make things out of metal and, well, machinist nerds kind of like that stuff. But also, machine shops tend to be more conservative in general. So there's some sort of inherently higher level of respect for industry and for the capitalist, the capitalist mindset that Elon Musk has, right? There's a kind of a... So when this part comes through, what I'm trying to get at here is that sometimes you get an order for a SpaceX part, and this part is treated with a higher reverence than just an average part. Even if it's exactly the same kind of piece that you would be making for some other company, this one SpaceX part is treated with higher respect just because it's going to go to SpaceX, just because SpaceX has this reputation. And it's because, like I said, machinists tend to just respect the SpaceX piece more. And so what happens is, just because of the name attached to the piece ends up becoming a higher quality part because everybody that interacts with it, because, a machine shop will have 5 to 10 people in it, and then this piece will be passed from one hand to another, from one machine to another, and, as they convert it from whatever it started as to whatever they're going to export it as. So the SpaceX part, just because it has the name SpaceX attached to it, ends up being a higher quality piece just because people care about it more. Which is, well, it's not always true. It's not like every machinist loves SpaceX, but I think that the overlap between machinists and SpaceX fans is probably slightly higher than the overlap between the average person and SpaceX fans. And so what I'm trying to get at here is that the story of SpaceX, kind of the story that Elon Musk has created, and also that has just been created around the... I went to go visit SpaceX down in Brownsville, Texas, SpaceX Starbase, and there are actually just people camped out outside of the base just watching it. There's people there's people that have dedicated YouTube channels and websites, and like SpaceX has an entire unpaid wing of marketing, of just volunteer marketers, right? Because they're just people who are just SpaceX fans that just keep track of everything that they're doing, watching them all the time, and just spreading the message. And it's because it's a very exciting mission for some people. The whole goal of SpaceX is to go to Mars. And so Elon has just kind of built this narrative. He's built this almost an identity, right? A SpaceX identity. Being a SpaceX fan is an identity that some people have. And, well, it results in, his mission of going to Mars is actually helped by the identity, because the pieces that they get for their machines, for their rockets, and for whatever they build are just higher quality pieces because people care about it more. So There's a value. There's actual real value in the SpaceX fan identity, the SpaceX narrative. There's real, it's not measurable, but like you could order the same exact piece from a machine shop 2 times and just tag one with SpaceX and tag the other one with some boring company, and the SpaceX one is just more likely to be a higher quality part. And so this idea, this narrative, this idea of a narrative is actually so important. And it kind of gets me thinking about, like, we don't, I wasn't alive during World War II. I wasn't. But I get the feeling that a similar narrative existed, but instead of SpaceX, it was kind of America. It was like the America narrative. So if there was a piece that was going to be added to a tank that was going to go on the front lines of World War II, that piece would be treated with high reverence. If there was some sort of, whatever manufacturing process there was, if it was contributing to the American identity, to the narrative of America, it was probably treated with higher reverence. And nowadays, we do not have the American identity anymore. We don't have that kind of reverence for our country. There seems to be, I took a Middle Eastern history class in college as an elective. And a large part of the conversation in that class was nationalism, right? What is nationalism and what are the pros and cons? Clearly there are cons, but also clearly there's advantages to nationalism. Like, if you have a strong national identity, that can be good for everybody in the country. It can be bad for people outside the country, but it's good for people in the country. And, to me, it's comparable to the whole SpaceX identity now. It's like, instead of national identities, we have the Elon Musk identity, right? Like, we just have, the identity still exists, right? We still have this, I think humans still have an urge to group up and form communities and form identities and have shared narratives, shared stories. And so instead of having the American identity now, we just have the SpaceX identity. But, it can't be a good thing that we don't have an American narrative. I just don't think that that's a good thing. Like, there's no uniting narrative of all Americans anymore. There's no uniting identity. And I don't know if there ever was one. Like, maybe I'm just, a common critique of sort of the conservative mindset is that there never really was this united narrative. But I can't imagine that World War II, like, if you go back to 1940s, right? There must have been, I'm not saying everybody was on board with the narrative, but there must have been more cohesiveness, right? A higher cohesion. There must have been more of a national accepted identity. And not everybody accepted it, but people were kind of more on the same team, more on the same page back then, right? That's what it feels like. And again, I wasn't alive then. Maybe I have a naive understanding of history. Maybe back then was just as ununited as today, but it seems like today there really is no American identity anymore. There is no... It's almost like some people... I get the sense that some people think we should leave nationalism behind. But, you see so much negative connotation around the word nationalism these days. And it doesn't really make sense to me, because we have to have a national identity. We can't just have a global identity, can we? We can't just be human. We have to be humans of something, right? And that's why we have humans who are SpaceX fans. We have humans who identify with certain groups, but I feel like we need to identify with our nation. We have to. Just so we can run the country. Just so we can all agree, like, hey, we are Americans and we need to get along and cooperate and, make sure America doesn't fall apart. And it seems like, some people don't really seem to think that that's a good idea. They don't seem to think that... I don't know. I don't really know what's going on. The past few days I haven't been releasing videos because I haven't really had much to say. And I think it's just because I don't really know... I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. Like, I'm totally on board to get back into the American mindset. Like, I don't see anything wrong with, like, there's nothing wrong with patriotism. There's nothing wrong with patriotism and nationalism. There's really nothing wrong with being pro-America. There's nothing wrong with being like, fuck yeah, let's go team, you know? Like, there should be, we need that team, we need to be a team. We need to work as a team. We have to. If we just hate each other, if we're just shitting on each other and attacking each other all the time, you know, that's what it feels like it is today. It's like we have two teams. We have two identities in this country that just cannot get along with each other. We need the one uniting national identity. We really do. And it seems like there's, for some reason, you know, we've lost the reverence. Like, we need to actually have something that we're all subservient to. Like, there needs to be an ideal that's higher than all of us, that unites all of us. Like, one ideal, not two ideals, not 10. There needs to be the one uniting factor that brings all Americans together. I think that's kind of what we've been looking for, in a way. I think that's what everybody sort of wants, whether they say it or not. Because how could you not want that? How could you want there to be 2 groups or 10 groups in the United States? You want there to be one United States. United States, right? You know, just to bring it back to Yang again, but UBI is one ideal. It's one thing that everybody's underneath. We need that uniting thing. Like, that's why I'm so into UBI, is because it unites all Americans. Jeff Bezos and a homeless guy makes them both the same person in a way, right? The same value, I guess. So, you know, this is just something I think about. This is just, you know, I always have conversations with my brother, and he always goes, yeah, we made a SpaceX part today. And just everybody in the shop always goes like, ooh, it's for SpaceX, you know? And like, I want that energy, but for America, you know? And you'll notice how Elon, that reverence for SpaceX is very close to nationalism. It's very close. It's like parallel to nationalism, where it's like one increment off. Because SpaceX is an American company. And the people who are pro-space, pro-rockets, you know, they're very pro-NASA, pro-America. It's kind of the same blend of ideas. So it's like, the energy is still there. The desire for some sort of uniting national identity is still there. It's just been, you know, I'm not saying I want to go back to the World War II kind of thing, but there is this kind of world, I imagine, where everybody in the community is actually together on something, right? And it's almost like having a world war sort of unites people. Maybe that's what we need. Maybe we need China to invade. We need Russia to finally do what it's going to do. Start World War III. And then we can finally be united together. Even though that seems impossible. There's just like, it's either we unite or we fight, right? There's no really, we can't just exist peacefully as two identities in one nation. It needs to be one nation. Almost under, I mean, there's a reason they say under God. Because God sort of represents the ultimate ideal. So it's under one ideal. This was, that's just my thoughts on that. We need, I don't really think you can argue with the fact that we need an identity. We need like a form of some kind of narrative. It just has to be a narrative that unites everybody. An American narrative. Whatever that means. Like, people need to identify as something. And we need to identify as Americans. Like, as whatever the team is, whatever you want to call it. I don't think you can just identify as a member of a global community. I don't think that works. We can't just identify as humans, because we still, I mean, that's what this essay that I wrote in this Middle Eastern history class really, I spent a long time on it. It was titled Nationalism versus Globalism. And how, you know, back in the 1900s, we have come out of an age of nationalism. We have. We're kind of in a post-nationalist age somehow. But we're still nations. We're still countries. And we still, you know, we seem to be in some sort of tension between globalism and nationalism. There's some sort of reluctance to identify as a global identity, but it's because there's still utility in the national identity, I think. We still need the national identity, even if we're all united under one global identity. Like, to me, this is all about the story, right? It's all about the storylines that we follow. You're only, like, America's just an idea in all of our heads, right? We just, as monkeys, as animals, we need to organize ourselves in some way. And that organizational principle really emerges as a national identity, really. That's what I think. And I think that it actually, like I said, it's useful. It provides utility. You actually get better made things. Like, your life actually becomes better. Your institutions will be better. Like, if everybody believes very strongly in the American education system, and, you know, if we had national pride in our education system, it would end up being better somehow, I think. But we just don't. We don't have national pride. We just, like, Americans that live in America think America sucks. So, and it will continue to suck. If we all think it sucks, it only gets better if we sort of, you know, I think this is like some of the energy Trump captured, which is like, make America great again. But there's actually, you know, America, at least at one point, was great. There's no reason why we couldn't make it great again, really. I think that phrase, like, it's kind of true. And, you know, again, the criticism is like, the criticism of Trump and the conservatives is that, like, there's a desire to go backwards. But to me, it's like, patriotism and progressivism are not exclusive concepts. You can be patriotic and still be forward thinking. Like, we can have a futurist view of the world, a very technological futurist view, progressive, you know, liberal even, and still be patriotic and still be a little bit nationalistic. You know, it can still exist. There seems to be some fear of nationalism. Anyway, I'm gonna stop talking now. Today's January 22nd. I think I said that. It's Saturday. Okay, bye.